why are you in this race? I mean, Nan Whaley was in it first. Why didn't you consider going for another race to give Democrats a better chance at winning another office? Why are you in this race?
Well, I'm running, Karen, for governor because Ohio needs a comeback. For decades, incomes in Ohio have been shrinking relative to the national economy. And in my city, incomes have been rising. The middle class is getting bigger. Poverty's down. We grew twice as fast as the state of Ohio. And I don't believe in Ohio you can win without giving people economic hope. And the fact is that my record's better than Ohio's, and my record's better than Dayton, and Ohio's better than Dayton's record. And so I don't know how you fire a Republican and replace them with someone who isn't as good as the status quo. My record is better than the status quo. And so if Democrats are going to win, I think we need a candidate who, in fact, has a record better than the Republican stewardship of our state.
A key proposal of your campaign is legalizing marijuana, taxing it to fund 30,000 broadband and clean energy jobs will pay an average of $60,000 a year. How will you get that done unless the legislature is on board with that? And have any other states legalized and taxed marijuana with the taxes going to a specific goal like this?
Well, a couple things. First is that virtually every Democrat supports legal marijuana, and now we have Republicans introducing legislation to decriminalize. But Mike DeWine has promised to veto it. So you need a veto-proof majority if he is the governor. But if I'm the governor, we only need 51%. With the maps that are going to be fairer, we're going to get more Democrats, most likely. And we only need probably 10% or 12% of the Republicans to get to the votes that we need. Having said that, if that fails, I intend to take it to a vote of the people. And being governor gives you the ability to kind of organize a campaign like that. And what I've seen, and just like Michigan and Pennsylvania, this is a movement whose time has come.
You would be responsible as governor for coming up to 2-year state budget. Policy Matters Ohio says in the last 16 years, changes in tax legislation have led to 60% of Ohio households with the lowest incomes paying more annual taxes on average. The richest 1% of Ohio households with an average income of almost $1.5 million now paying less, $51,000 less per year than they once did. So these budgets have also included tax cuts, but increases in certain things like the state sales tax, tax on gasoline, cigarettes, and tobacco products. What would you do differently when it comes to taxes in the state budget?
Well, look, it's certainly the case, and you just made the argument very effectively just by recitating the facts, that Mike DeWine and the Republicans who have governed our state for decades have shrunk the middle class, and they have made it more expensive to live in Ohio. In Cincinnati, I led tax cuts. And the fact is that we were still able to invest in education and clean energy and infrastructure, and wages are up. And so at a big picture level, they have made the average Ohioan poorer to the average American, whereas in Cincinnati, the opposite is true. Look, I've picked issues that I know can garner bipartisan support. Clean water, high-speed broadband Wi-Fi is the number one issue in small-town rural Ohio, which are disproportionately represented by Republicans. These are things people want. And then, of course, my energy dividend will put literally money in people's pockets, similar to what they do in Alaska and North Dakota. 2 states, by the way, run by Republicans. And if it's good enough for their people, why wouldn't it be good enough for our people?
If you are elected, you'll be dealing with perhaps the biggest development in the history of Ohio, the Intel project. What are your plans to push that project forward when there are some concerns, for instance, about state incentives in that? And how will you measure the success of that project and make sure that it's on track to where the state wants it to go?
Look, of course, we're glad that Intel's coming to Ohio, but we still don't know the transparency on how many billions of our money is being spent. And remember, that money's coming from Cincinnati, it's coming from Youngstown, it's coming from Toledo, it's coming from Cleveland, it's coming from Akron. It's a corporate welfare model that is not replicable. We can't keep doing it. You run out of other people's money. And so we need a totally different economic growth strategy that democratizes opportunity in the state, not that every job has to go to Columbus. People in Dayton, people in Toledo, people in Akron are saying, where is our next deal? The research shows that the only sustainable way to grow an economy is to invest in education and infrastructure. So upgrade our research and development capacities at our state universities. This is how Carnegie Mellon revitalized Pittsburgh. This is how Stanford literally created the Silicon Valley. We have state universities in every corner of the state. We can upgrade the research and development to attract small businesses, but they've got to have good infrastructure of high-speed Wi-Fi, et cetera. And that spreads out opportunities into not just everyone having to move to Columbus, but having nodes of activity throughout the state for different types of lifestyles that our great diverse state offers in different parts of the state.
You have two groups of Ohioans here I want to ask you about kind of together. You have younger Ohioans. We've had a brain drain issue for a long time where younger Ohioans have been leading the state, but we're also one of the oldest states in the country and our population is getting grayer all the time. Is there a way to keep the younger people in Ohio while still keeping the older people happy here as well? I mean, how do you reach both of those populations and try to work to keep them satisfied with their very different needs?
Yeah, this is what we had the same issues in Cincinnati. And now we're attracting young people faster than any other part of the state. And a big part of that is embracing diversity and inclusion. You know, Cincinnati's comeback, I've argued in multiple forums, is for a lot of reasons, but the two most important reasons was getting police community relations, race relations in a better footing, and going from a city that had a terrible anti-gay rights record to being the first city in Ohio to get a 100% score from the Human Rights Campaign, which happened during my time as mayor. And so by opening and welcoming people, you can attract young people. And that has worked in Cincinnati. I'm not just saying this academically. I've seen it happen in my own city, and I helped lead the effort. Look, senior citizens are struggling to pay their property taxes. I'm going to be joining up with Representative Dan Troy to increase the homestead exemption for senior citizens. We've got to provide financial relief so people can stay in their home, can age in their home. And this is a critical issue for senior citizens. And so we have policy ideas for both. Young people need to know that the state is welcoming, and we have to have high quality research and development, state universities and hospitals, as I mentioned earlier, to attract and keep the best minds in our state.
And you've also said that you would temporarily suspend the gas tax. Is that correct?
Yeah, temporarily reduce it, yes, to provide relief until inflation goes down.
For how long? And how do you make up for the money that is going to be lost that can go to road construction, which people will say is desperately needed?
Of course it's needed. We would do it by replacing with legalizing marijuana, taxing and putting the taxes into infrastructure. And so I think that's what the Republicans should do now. They have the power to do it. They can do it now. And that would provide meaningful relief. Recreational marijuana is a luxury tax. It's not using it is not a necessity to function, but getting in a car or getting in a bus to get to and from your job is a necessity. And so the gas tax is inherently regressive. And of course we need it when gas prices come down, but I would replace it with legalizing marijuana, taxing and using those taxes instead.
How much do you think the state can bring in from legalizing marijuana?
Well, if you look at Michigan, which is already at 280 million annually, and that's just from an excise tax at the source of growth of marijuana, sort of on the production side, does not include the sales tax paid at the retail side. On a population basis alone, Ohio should get to 350 million annually just on this excise tax, but then another several hundreds of millions of dollars from the additional sales tax, which is more than enough money to borrow the $8 billion that I intend to borrow to build the Wi-Fi and the cell phone coverage across the state, and to fix the roads and bridges, and to expand clean energy projects across Ohio.
Are you too much of a conservative for Democrats and too much of a liberal for Republicans? Can you really reach those populations?
Look, I mean, I'm running a campaign that is about providing legal marijuana. No governors leaned into it the way I have. I have a commercial running right now that talks about legalizing marijuana. I'm proposing the first ever basic income for the people of Ohio through an energy dividend like they have in Alaska and North Dakota, Republican states, by the way. So I don't know how you characterize all that, but what I do know is that people in Ohio need a comeback. And if we're going to fire a Republican in a state that Trump won twice, we need a candidate who's got a record better than what the Republicans have done to our state. My record is better. Dayton's record is worse. this is not a question of anything other for Democrats than who can beat Mike DeWine. And that is the critical question, because there are so many things that we as Democrats care about: women's rights, gay rights, civil rights, voting rights, all of which are deeply under threat right now. And the only way we can stop a Republican legislature is to veto those attacks. And the only way to get a veto stamp is to win. And I believe that Teresa and I have a winning message and record that is credible and gives us our best chance of winning in November.
And finally, on that note, if you're elected, you'll have to deal with most likely a Republican-dominated state legislature that not only has not embraced Democratic ideas, but has been openly hostile in some cases to some of these ideas. It's easy to say that you'll work across the aisle, but how can you make these promises on guns and abortion and some of these other issues you just talked about when this is what you might be up against?
Well, look, when it comes to individual constitutional rights, there's no compromise. But the agenda that I'm running on to get done, I'm going to try to stop some of their attacks on freedom, but I'm going to pursue an agenda that I believe has bipartisan support. And I would not have succeeded in turning Cincinnati around and it being the fastest growing part of the state if I wasn't able to get things done in a bipartisan fashion. All of my budgets were bipartisan. I convinced Tom Brinkman and Bill Seitz to support a tax levy to expand public transit in Hamilton County. I have a long history of working in a bipartisan manner. But beyond that, I've picked issues that I know are deeply popular across the aisle. Fixing roads and bridges is popular. High-speed Wi-Fi for the whole state is popular in the most conservative parts of the state. Clean water initiatives is critical to many rural parts of the state. There's a huge sea change on legalization of marijuana. It is now supported by 65% of the people of Ohio. So there has been a move in the direction of the agenda that I'm running on. And so I think that will find us the ability to do common cause, but there'll be many other areas where I will stand up for individual freedom and rights and never compromise. In fact, as mayor of Cincinnati, I vetoed more bills than all of my predecessors combined. And so I have no problem standing up when I think that legislature's gone too far in a direction. And so I'll have no problem saying no to them when they attack individual rights and freedom, but I will work with them to bring jobs to Ohio.